that previous session, which was a fascinating session, and I enjoyed it very much. And my thanks also to all of those panelists who were speaking quite happily for 2 hours without any PowerPoints, which has been one of the key things about the Cassandra Conference, that when we designed it, what we wanted to really do was to hear people speaking their true opinions, speaking from the heart, without notes, without PowerPoint presentations, and really giving their true opinions regarding the situation in the Mediterranean and the effects of climate change on absolutely vital socio-political issues such as migration, such as conflict, and such as gender equality. So I'm delighted to welcome, and I'm honored to be able to be present and welcome this very final session of the Cassandra Conference 2021. This is the concluding session, and I'm joined by, as could only be the case in a moment like this, by some very eminent experts from some very important organizations. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, BERND GAWLIK from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, Nina RAASAKKA, who represents the United Nations Environment Programme and is the leader of the World Water Quality Alliance, ALMOTAZ, who represents the Union for the Mediterranean, based here in Barcelona, which is where the Cassandra Conference is based, and last but certainly by no means least, VILALTA, who is the Director General of Foreign Affairs and Open Government of the Generalitat of Catalonia. So first of all, welcome to all of you. Welcome to the Cassandra Conference, not for the first time in the case of BERND, ALMOTAZ, and Nina, who have already participated in some of the panels. And having participated in some of the panels, I would like to ask now all of you, just to get the conversation kicking off, what sort of opinion have you come away with from the Cassandra Conference as a whole? Perhaps Munsa, you first would like to answer that question.
Well, thank you, Richard. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Eurecat, the Technology Center of Catalonia, to organize this wonderful event. I think it has been full of inspiring sessions and outstanding experts. And as a General Director for Foreign Action of the Generalitat de Catalunya, I'm logically extremely aware of the social and political challenges that face Mediterranean as a region. And over the last 3 days, this conference, Cassandra, has placed the spotlight on climate change and its possible effects on 3 major issues, which both the Mediterranean and the rest of the world face: migration, conflict, and gender equality. Cassandra has examined these vital issues by bringing together scientists and researchers with politicians and decision makers, writers and artists with human rights and environmental activists, and the world of business with organizations dedicated to citizen engagement. And in my opinion, this represents an important step towards the definition of the obstacles to be overcome and the means to co-create realistic solutions. The Cassandra Conference has made clear that the most effective way forward is to work across sectoral, social, and institutional barriers. I think we live in a highly interconnected world with ever more complex challenges to respond to, thus highlighting the importance of a new thinking approach to policymaking. Global challenges require multi-level and multi-stakeholder partnerships, as the UN 2030 Agenda recommends. No organization alone will succeed by itself. These partnerships must work together for and in collaboration with the citizen to create long-term visions to resolve, mitigate, or at least adapt to the current environmental situation. The scientists and the researchers have an obligation to maintain a permanent two-way dialogue with their socio-political counterparts, no matter their age, gender, ethnicity, or spiritual beliefs. Eurecat, the Technology Center of Catalonia, has identified this responsibility, and through the organization of Cassandra has reached out to other social sectors in order to create a new form of solution creation. As a government of Catalonia, we represent a Mediterranean land. We are proud of our Mediterranean identity and culture. We look our heritage of a past, our shared history with the other nations that populate the shores of Mare Nostrum, and we seek a prosperous and just future by means of collaboration and cooperation with all Mediterranean cultures. We seek to come together to overcome the greatest challenges of the 21st century with the participation of all concerned in a spirit of equality and respect, to find scientific and technological solutions, and to combine this with a capacity to communicate effectively with society as a whole. The representative of the organization who have spoken at Cassandra, including the United Nations, the European Commission and Parliament and others, have clearly demonstrated that collaboration is not only possible, but highly desirable. And I think that is the core message of Cassandra. So I congratulate you for this event. Richard, thank you.
Thank you very much, Montserrat, for that really eloquent introduction. And perhaps now if I can pass over to ALMOTAZ and ask you, ALMOTAZ, you participated in one of the sessions yesterday. And what are the conclusions that you have, your first conclusions which you've drawn from this conference as a whole?
Thank you very much, Richard. I was very delighted actually to be part of this Cassandra initiative. And I hope that what happened to previous theological Cassandra will not happen to us. That means that we need people to hear the great recommendations, the great premonitions that are happening now based on science and technology that been fed to this platform through multi-verse approaches and we got like what I call it the multi-stakeholder approaches. I was very happy to see all those UN agencies, international financing institute like World Bank, think tank organization, civil society, citizen engagement representatives, as well as international organization and regional organization like us. This is a message. There were a clear message that we need to start thinking about not only ideological aspects. We should think that people and the human are the same, and we should start thinking to go beyond the borders. Either these borders are socially or economically, because problems, challenges on the climate change, they don't apply for visas. They don't land on the airport and ask you, hey, I want to come to your country, can you give me a visa? No, problems, they come to you without this, without applying for Schengen, without applying for American visa. What happened in the world, any spot, it can happen to you. And this is the time to understand how to learn from each other. And the best thing is not to learn from each other mistakes, while to learn from each other's success. And this is the opportunity that Cassandra had provided, that there were many success stories that worth that me sitting at the UFM Secretariat here in Barcelona, hosted by the Kingdom of Spain, and working on a regional cooperation, bringing all 42 member states around the Mediterranean to work together and think together, that to take them on board in our policy recommendation and in our conferences. In 29, we will be celebrating the Mediterranean Day. And I promise you, Richard, thank you, you already putting the logo. Many things that I already start putting to my colleagues at the communication in order to highlight in the Mediterranean Day, that if we want to keep celebrating Mediterranean Day, Mediterranean culture, and create a great Mediterranean Renaissance, we need to advance on cooperation and dialogue and building a concrete processes where we give the leadership for the most fragile segment of our society. We have to give the leadership for our moms and our sisters and our daughters. I mean here, when it comes to the role of women and young women in the process. And we need to also put on board the young people. The future belongs for the young people. So they don't need me or all generation to draw their future. And this was very important message came from Cassandra. If we want to work for the future, of the Mediterranean, we need to harness on the young people. Let them draw their future. But I know that we need to empower them. We need to create system and procedure in order to what I call it, to create the ecosystem that enable them to create their entrepreneurialism, their job creation, and to be contributor to the GDP by doing three things: awareness, education, and engage them on the science diplomacy aspects. And thanks for you, Richard. Thanks for BERND also, that the call for thinking out of the box approach, like acknowledging that science is rigid sometimes, and the approach of Cassandra and also the approach of our book that we're going to do on the gateway for the Mediterranean are giving a new tools, a new mean to make science diplomacy more interactive, more easy to be reached by the politician, by the policymakers. As an example, this virtual reality approach in the book, absolutely, this is the way that we can reach to the politician, giving them scientific-based data and recommendation, like what Cassandra, the new form of 2021 of Cassandra, that giving not a premonition, it's giving scientific evidence and approved warning system to us. The warning system not to scare us, but to motivate us to start thinking out of the box by, I repeat myself here, by we cannot succeed if we don't put our hand in hand together, because if we will tackle it alone, we will fail. We can do more by joining our forces, by joining our potential. Thank you again, and I promise you that many of your recommendations will be taken on board in my sector, where I am working on the WIFI Nexus aspects in the Union for the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ALMOTAZ. And I'll be coming back to some of the points that both you and Monsa have made a little later on in the conversation. But Nina, perhaps from you, an opening statement. I see that we've lost BERND. That's the effect of ALMOTAZ there talking slowly. So let me pass over to Nina. Nina, your initial reactions to what has been Cassandra.
So thank you very much, Richard, and thank you also to my fellow panelists here, and really to all the panelists of the Cassandra Conference. We were really delighted from the World Water Quality Alliance side to have supported this this conference to better understand and identify the scientific, technological, and socio-political answers to the climate change and health, migration, conflict, and gender inequality in the Mediterranean. And again, the state of water quality and quantity, of course, has been talked about a lot. It's obviously a big part of the issue because it's such an inherent part of this equation with regards to the drivers of migration and conflict and climate impacts. And again, I think this is great. I guess in my role as a coordinator, what I almost take for granted, I guess, is that we need partnerships to find solutions to these very multidisciplinary problems that really affect so many people. They come from so many different sectors, and to me, it's always been clear that there is no way that we can solve these very complex challenges. Climate change, of course, is just one complex challenge in itself that interlinks with environmental degradation, drives conflict, migration, etc. And there's no easy links, again, especially when we talk about climate change, which has so many different variables in terms of changes in temperature and rainfall, the secondary impacts that come from that on one hand, we can't draw a simple cause effect necessarily, but and of course with climate change, we also have modeling outputs that give us future scenarios that are based on a set of assumptions. So again, this is not a reason to hold us back from action. I thought, again, to address these issues, we need these partnerships. And I think Cassandra is a great example of a platform that's brought together the civil society, the the UN institutions, international organizations, but also really touching on these more philosophical questions about, for example, the role of art in driving some of these solutions. What is the role of scientists, and how can we improve our thinking and our actions as scientists in order to really get the message out? And of course, that's something that I think about a lot. I mean, at UNEP, the World Water Quality Alliance was convened to produce the World Water Quality Assessment. That's our direct mandate of UNEP. But again, and this is kind of where I think it's great that Cassandra mirrors a bit what we're trying to do at the Alliance, is that we convene numerous experts around the world and expert institutions. We're always open to more. And we aim to go beyond that direct mandate of producing a World Water Quality Assessment, but to really also engage on the social side with youth groups to make sure that the science coming out of some of the modeling work streams of the Alliance can be used and can be taken up, can be commented by youth groups who can see what exactly this future in the next 20, 30 years will look like. And I think this is exactly what's needed. Again, definitely in the Mediterranean region, which is, in fact, which I've learned a lot about in these last 2 days, but also across the world, given the nature of these very complex problems that we're facing. And I thought it was also another part that was very interesting, is to think about our role as individuals versus the role of governments, and how we also try on an individual level to push forward these solutions.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with what you're saying. I'm going to be playing the devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, that's the way I am. Now, we've been talking a lot over the last 3 days about the Mediterranean. And in fact, this is a question which I also asked as a written question to the previous panel. And they were discussing it a bit as well. We talk about the Mediterranean as a region, and I see that BERND has returned. BERND, I promise you, we will not allow ALMOTAZ to talk anymore. I mean, you obviously disappeared when you were listening to ALMOTAZ. But anyway, let me just pose this question before I pass later on the word to BERND. So we've been talking, as I said, the last 3 days, we've been talking about the Mediterranean as a region and what have you. The Mediterranean is very, very, very diverse. I'm now 60 years old. I know I don't look it, but I am 60 years old. And I've spent more than half my life living here on the shores of the Mediterranean, here in Catalonia. I consider myself now to be Mediterranean, as indeed many people who've come from other places in the world do once they settle here. There's nothing at all in common, for example, between Catalonia and the south of Italy, or indeed the south of Italy and, for example, Turkey, or indeed, for example, Morocco and what might be, for example, the culture in Egypt or what have you. We have an amazing wealth of diversity. We have, surely, this is the region where more culture, more philosophy, more religious faith has been born than any other single area in the world. And I will probably be shot down there by various societies who are non-European or non-Mediterranean in saying that. But I mean, this has in many ways been the cradle of civilization historically. Can we actually now talk about a Mediterranean identity so that when, for example, Cassandra, as it has been doing over the last 3 days, has been promoting a coherent collaboration between the Mediterranean as a whole, can we legitimately say that we are able to do that? Is there a Mediterranean identity on which we can work? ALMOTAZ, I mean, you're Mediterranean 100%, born and bred. Do you consider yourself to be Mediterranean? Do you think that there is a possibility that the whole region can come together and work together as a whole to face the challenges that are posed by climate change?
Actually, yes. The simple answer for your question, yes, there is a Mediterranean identity, which is the Mediterranean identity that we are sharing the same heritage. We have most likely a shared culture. We call it in Barcelona El Cultura de Aceti y Vino. It's very good, something that we can promote. But in a practical term, I think, yes, the issue of threat from different socioeconomic and environmental aspects are really raising the awareness for the people who govern the different parts of the Mediterranean that they should work together. And one concrete example, two concrete examples, is the Barcelona Convention, as an example. Barcelona Convention, we celebrated 25 years of Barcelona Convention the last year, and the celebration was here in Palau Real, having the Minister of Foreign Affairs of European Union, here is external action, and also with many other entities. The second one, the establishment of a Secretariat of the Union for the Mediterranean, is another evidence that there is a Mediterranean identity, and there is an institution bringing together not only the, let us say, the 22 Mediterranean countries, we're bringing all 42 here, the all European Union entities and the non-European countries around the Mediterranean, starting by Mauritania. I know Mauritania is not also Mediterranean, to Egypt, from Palestine to Turkey, and then we go to the 3 Western Balkan countries. And here is another evidence that, yes, there are an identity. Identity is taking form, but are we really up to this challenge? I hope that we will be in the future, in case we consolidate and showcases that when those people work together, had managed to yield something positive. Here, I am not talking about that we are not doing positive things. We are doing a lot of positive things in the Mediterranean, but the problem, the challenges are huge. And unfortunately, the region is a very strategic place and there are a lot of interests. So we are suffering from unnecessary conflict. The region is the least integrated region in the world. You know this, Richard, according to the OECD, according to the World Bank. And the trade, as an example, between the countries in the north is very great. You talk about something 90%, and then you have 5% between north and south, and less than 1, 2 to 3 between the south countries. Meanwhile, the trade between individual with other region is more. We are leaving a lot of resources in the region without giving them economic value, and then translate the economic value into socio-economic value, stability, creating more jobs to the region. And we are not considering to amalgamate more the concept of the Mediterranean identity into socio-economic aspects. We are very proud about cultural identity, about this shared heritage, but still we need to invest a lot of research, science-based policy paper, and to showcase that in case we did it together, then our identity will be translated into socio-economic things. And I don't need an identity, by the way, that will not create a better socio-economic reality. Also, this is another thing. I am not saying we have to take about our individual culture. We have to put it and to enhance it and to make it contributing, but we don't want to have like a closed identity. We need to have an open identity that contribute to the betterment of life and to fight our, so I don't want to use this term to fight, to stand tall against all of our problems. Our problems are related to migration. People migrate now not only to find better services only, they migrate for this, but they migrate to find food. And the distribution of the food in the Mediterranean is not really that it's available, but it's not affordable. This is the problem. Food is available, but it's not affordable. And then we waste food because we have more food in the region, but there is no ability for the population to pay to have this food, and the end food goes to the bin and to the dumping site, unfortunately. And how I can talk about one identity if I don't translate it into a system and the procedure that can accept the other, or making contribution to this gas emission, the north and the south. There are a big difference between the countries in the Mediterranean when it comes to the contributing to the problem of the climate change, because some of them are industrial, some of them are not. Now we are very, very happy that Europe is going to be the model for zero emission by hopefully 2050, and this is something that should be reflected into the investment policies to the south, because there is no meaning to the 7 countries of European around the Mediterranean that they are zero emission, and they have 15 countries around the Mediterranean that they still suffering from the effect of the climate change and suffering from access to the alternative, as an example, sources of energy, how to manage their water resources.
So let me just interrupt you there, because we have finally got BERND back, and before he disappears again. So BERND, I want to go back to the original question to you, but also add this other one. So first of all, give me your general opinion about what you've seen of Cassandra, what messages perhaps you're taking away from that in the first place. And secondly, as a German, but who like me, I mean, I'm English, you're German, but we are both people who have lived a lot of our lives on the Mediterranean, you in Italy, myself here in Catalonia. Do you believe that it is possible that there can be a unified Mediterranean approach to the challenges of climate change? I mean, for example, ALMOTAZ himself has just said now that, in fact, we're not an integrated region. We're not necessarily, we have perhaps many common features in our cultures, but that we are not particularly friendly to each other. BERND, welcome, first of all, welcome back, and over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I hope you can hear me. Can you just?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, that works. Apologies for this one. I mean, if I would answer what you just asked me, I would speak for the next 1.5 hours alone, and I think that's not what the intention is.
Yeah,
so
no, that's not the intention, BERND.
Let me make this a little bit personal, and strangely enough, when I was preparing my thoughts and sorting them, I came to a very personal message. But first of all, you asked me about my opinion on an experience of this conference. I think this is the best conference I've seen and participate and had the privilege to be an active member of during the pandemic. This conference managed a few days after COP26 to change things. And it did so by what we as scientists, and Richard and I, you know very, very much that we like this term, by implementing the quintuple helix. So bringing the stakeholders of the private, the public sector, research academia, and the citizen together on a common table called culture. And I cannot stress enough the importance to have managed a session here in this conference with artists in there. This is extremely, because it changes the narrative, and it changes it. One of the words which resonates very much is the word emotion. So this was certainly a very emotional event. I think what you build here is trust, and you manage to send a message of hope. This is what I take home. I feel grateful on one side. I feel honored to be part of it, but most importantly, I feel thoughtful. I feel thoughtful in the sense of I'm asking myself, what do I need to do, me, Bernd, as a human being, not as a scientist, as a member of the European Commission? What is it that I am trying to preach, but where do I fail actually to practice it to myself? And with this, I come to the second part of what you are asking me. You're asking me, you refer to me as being German. And let me make a little a narrative here out of my personal story. I define myself as European with a German passport because my kids are not anymore. I'm married with an Italian. I'm really, I have found home in the Mediterranean. My grandfathers caused one of the biggest disasters this planet ever has seen. They were German soldiers. They caused killing, murder, rape, crime, and presumably the biggest ever migration of people on this planet. As a result, my parents were migrants in their own country because they came from a part which today is Poland, and they had to leave this part because they paid the price for the crimes committed by their fathers. Myself today, I'm a migrant. I'm in the Mediterranean because I migrated for work. I had the privilege and the luck to do this in a very well-resourced setting, but I'm a migrant. In this regard, I'm no better than the people right now knocking at the doors of the European Union and want to come in. Some of them want to come in because they are really seeking asylum, and others are coming in because they want to have a better life for themselves and their children. And I don't feel myself to be in the right to condemn them or harm them. So the Mediterranean identity in the past is something which also in the work with ALMOTAZ and you, Richard, we brought out. That existed and that will continue to exist. But what we fail to have is a Mediterranean identity for the future. And this identity must be based on common shared values. One of the principles of the European Union is to be united by diversity, and we tend a little bit sometimes to forget it, but it is this message which the European Union can bring into play. But it is only practical if the European Union has the guts to admit and to practice what we are praying and preaching. And right now, this is still maybe not the case. So here we are at a starting point. I think Cassandra is not an event in itself. It is a beginning. It is a beginning of a journey. And I'm really curious out of this conclusion on how we can shape this journey and make it a journey into a better future for the Mediterranean. And if we manage to do this, we have a blueprint to do this for all over the planet. Over to you, Richard.
I'm sorry, I had my own microphone off there, but I couldn't agree with you more with what you're saying. You and I have been working together now for a long while on what we call the Renaissance approach to science, culture, diplomacy. It certainly was something that was born here in the Mediterranean, and the cooperation between Eurecat and between the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, and then working, for example, together as well with institutions such as UNEP, we're trying to promote this form of turning what is a potential catastrophe, that is climate change, that could just result in the most impoverished sectors of society becoming even worse off, and only a very select few actually being able to benefit or to live a decent life in the long-term future, is something that I know that moves us both. Montserrat, as somebody who works in foreign affairs from a political side, but also from a technical side, going back a little bit again to this question of the Mediterranean, how realistic is it when we joyfully proclaim, fairly broad, sometimes generic sentences about the Mediterranean as of a region? From your perspective, are we being realistic? Is there really a capacity to be able to cooperate between the countries, between the nation states of the Mediterranean itself? Are we being naive when we propose this type of measure, or are there possibilities of it at least becoming a means of a more enhanced dialogue?
Well, I think this is not a very easy question, but I think that the most important thing is how can we make real the cooperation between the north and the south of the Mediterranean, because as my colleague said, this is a lot of diversity in the Mediterranean, and there's a lot of conflict, and this region is a place where most of the future is gonna happen there. But the most important thing is how can we manage this relation between the north of the Mediterranean, the north and the south of the Mediterranean region. I think we have to put the Mediterranean on the map as a region of the future with all this complexity. Now we're seeing like how the north is getting more important than the south. I think we have to enhance more, to promote more policies to make more visible the Mediterranean in the Europe. Well, it's not very. Well, as I said, it's not easy to manage this complexity, this diversity, but the north and south has to be more relationship.
I've received a question from one of the members of the audience, and I'd like to address it to all of you. And one of the things about Cassandra that's made Cassandra different to other conferences of this type is that we've been encouraging our speakers to interrupt each other and to basically have a normal conversation. So please feel free to just butt in as you guys answer this question. It's a question from VILALTA, who's from the University of Agder in Norway, but who also is a correspondent of Al Jazeera. And he says, we tend to think about migration in negative terms, as something to be managed or perhaps avoided altogether. But what about free movement of people? How can we build a unified Mediterranean approach to the climate crisis and other related challenges without movement across Mediterranean countries and beyond? Nina, let me ask you that question first of all.
Sure. Thank you, Richard. I was just noting that down. That was a long and eloquent question.
It was a very eloquent question.
Yeah. Well, I think, could you just repeat the last part of it, actually?
Sure. So basically, he's saying that, migration is considered, and this is one of the reasons why we deliberately made a point of highlighting the issue of migration in the Cassandra Conference. It's sometimes an issue that certainly a lot of politicians try to ignore. It can be a very thorny issue. It's certainly brought out the very worst in European politics as well, as we saw, for example, as a result of the Syrian crisis. And sometimes it brings out the very best in human beings, as was, for example, demonstrated on the first day of this conference, when there was a spectacularly emotional video produced by Open Arms, which was included in the conference, and which really demonstrated the human plight of migration across the Mediterranean and some of the true reasons behind it. But what Vito himself is asking here is he's saying, okay, apart from the fact that there is this issue of migration as we understand it at the moment, what about free movement of people? How would it be possible to build a unified Mediterranean approach to the climate crisis and other related challenges, such as migration, gender equality, the resolution of conflicts, without movement across Mediterranean countries and beyond? What he's saying is, isn't it necessary that we come to a point where instead of us being, for example, Catalans or Italians or French or Greeks or Turks or Egyptians, that surely a free borderless Mediterranean, wouldn't that help us to answer the questions of climate crisis? Wouldn't that help us to resolve some of the greatest issues that the planet itself faces?
Yeah, thank you. I think, again, I come from the European Union, which has free movement of people as across the European Union member states as one of its principles. So I guess that's what I tend to think about when hearing about free movement of people. And I agree that I think migration is often thought of in negative terms, but as Bernd had just mentioned, he's a migrant. I'm a migrant as well. I live in the African continent, and I moved here for work purposes. So again, migration, I think it is a good point that, especially when we have this discussion in Europe, that it's portrayed in a very negative light. It doesn't need to be, and maybe we need to change this narrative again. And also to mention that I think we need migration in Europe. We have an aging population, so we do need a movement of people, and I think this can also only encourage the generation of novel ways of thinking and ideas, and bringing in practices from other regions, which I think especially, when I think about it from the climate perspective, again, what we're seeing is these changes in average climate, less precipitation, more precipitation on average, changes in temperature. I'm thinking about how some of the lessons, there's a lot of focus on, for example, these solutions that have been used for decades that could help us deal with some of the climate challenges that we're facing now. This is something that I'm thinking about through promoting the free movements of people and having people move around from a region such as the Mediterranean, which is extremely arid, into places, for example, places in Europe that are becoming increasingly arid and will need new systems of thinking and ways of doing things, ways of building infrastructure, etc. So how to build a unified Mediterranean approach to the climate crisis and these other related challenges. I think there again, there's a need maybe to recognize some of the diversity of the Mediterranean region, and again work through these partnerships and see, I guess, how what structures could be set up to facilitate movement in a way that can bring solutions.
Let me, I'm playing the devil's advocate here.
Richard, if you allow me,
I'll pass the word over to you in just 2 seconds, but okay. Let me just broaden a bit more the question, because I think I understand where Vito is coming from. For example, when we've talked this week about the Mediterranean, we've talked this week about migration, which means migration can be internal. It can be from the rural community to the city. Indeed, very often it is. But it can also be international. It can be cross-frontier. We've talked about gender equality and the importance of really repairing the historical mistakes that we've made against women, where still even now, women are still 14 times more likely to die as a result of climate change than men. And that, unfortunately, is a terribly dramatic but very true statistic that was provided the other day by one of the speakers. We're talking as well about conflict, and conflict does tend to happen normally between different regions or between different nation states. Am I being utopic in perhaps saying that perhaps one day, as a result of climate crisis, as a result of society perhaps having to face up to a totally new world in many senses, that instead of identifying self as, for example, myself, hello, my name is Richard ELELMAN, I have a British passport and I'm a man, wouldn't it be better if I just presented myself as, hello, I'm Richard, full stop? Not my nationality, not my sex, not my gender, not my provenance or anything, just I'm Richard, judge me for what I am, and full stop. Bernd, over to you.
I think in this discussion which we have here, we have to be a little bit honest. The honest reaction I had to the question was, I don't know. I don't know if free movement would solve the problem. And I think we don't know. Nobody of us can answer reliably. We may have an opinion, but we don't have science for it. So let's take a little bit to the science. In 2018, there were more people from the United States migrating to Mexico than Mexicans to the United States. That is a scientific fact. Now, what you make out of this in the press, I assume you are all astonished as I am. Then I heard it when this figure was presented by my colleagues and friends from the European Center for Migration. Now, let's have a look on the history. Free movement in the European Union was not the beginning of the European Union, folks. That's not on how we built it. That came in as a prize later on. And we get very quickly used to it, as many of our EU citizens are used to an enormous amount of wealth of freedoms taken by now for granted. But look on the pandemic, what happens if you take them away, this freedom, which were so normal. Then suddenly people start to think, it's the same with water. As long as we have water coming out of the tap, nobody of us gives honestly a toss about water. But cut the water for a few hours in a city, and then believe me, it is the number one topic of any mayor in any city where this is happening. I think the answer of the Mediterranean is above all a value system which you have to create. You have to agree on rules and you have to stick to these rules. The Mediterranean is in a situation today because we imported to the Mediterranean a way of living which is not theirs. We talked a lot about culture. The way we do today agriculture in the Mediterranean is a way which we designed for doing agriculture in the 19th century in Central Europe. The European environment can cope with that. The Mediterranean environment can't digest it. And the problems you observe related to the environment are because we imposed a system which is not there. So yes, freedom of movement can help. No, it will not solve the problem from the beginning. It has to kick in later. We have first to think about other things. And we know this. What is actually not natural is not the migration. What is not natural is an artificial border drawn on a piece of paper, which has been normally drawn in the Mediterranean by somebody who conquered a piece of land before. And you have this in the 3,000 years of history. Over to you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, I liked BERND honesty, and I might add something about to be realistic. But I like what had been said by Nina and BERND in terms of we should acknowledge that this is a region, has identity, but we should build a concrete process to reach to something optimal. And if we want to do so, I think we should start planning for it. Migration in the Mediterranean, nobody will stop it because nobody had stopped it before. And all Mediterranean, it was related to migration and building cities. Phoenician came to Barcelona, came to everywhere, to Tunis, and constructed a lot of cities. And afterward, there were a mass movement of human being around the Mediterranean, and this is what created the Mediterranean. But when it comes now to the socio-economic aspects, I will agree with BERND that the free movement, it is not the solution at this stage because of a lot of variables. Among them, you cannot achieve socio-economic if there is no stability and security. And there were free movement need to implement a security measures that make sure that everybody is a little bit controlled, use what we are doing now. When we are living in Europe, I can travel from here to Hungary without anything, but I have a lot of digital identity. Everybody is doing it. But what is needed is easement to make more integration when it comes not only to the movement of human being between the different countries, but also to facilitate also the trade. Here, I'm talking about facilitation that the trade is more important at this stage in order to circulate our goods among us with less impact on the environment and the climate change, and absolutely there will be better prices and affordable for the citizen because the distances. And how we can do this? We can do this in absolutely scientific based approach, but we need to start reforming. I mean, reforming the process, the 3 R's, reforming regulation of how we deal with this trade among us, and also the what we call it, Richard, the thing that I produce a cucumber in Palestine, but I cannot send it to Jordan because of the standardization or something, labeling of a product, etc., etc. So here are some point to start with. Easement for giving, as an example, working visas. I'm not here talking about to give working visa for the best people in the south. We need to also make sure that migration is not a burden on the north. It is a burden, but also it is a drain for the south. Many countries invested on their engineers and their engineer end in Switzerland or in Sueca or in Spain, okay? Or so we need to tackle it as we were discussing it at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy. You were part of this discussion with water employment migration. We need to look at the source, at the transit, and at the destination. And how to solve it? By doing measures at the source. Here, when it comes to our sector, climate, water, energy, we need to dig deep there in order to make those sectors productive for jobs. And here we can make less migrant from the rural area to the urban area, and less migration from the south to the more, from the more south to the south, and from the south to the least north, and then from the least north to the north.
Yeah, I mean,
this is the measure. But at the end of the day, we need to reach to the point that we need to, I call it shrink the mountain. I'm copying the guy who went up to the Alp. We need to shrink the mountain. We have to identify a free movement in the Mediterranean. What is need to be done, and we start doing what we are doing. I don't want to be very optimistic, but what, as an example, the UFM Secretariat is doing when it comes to having kind of declaration. Yes, they are not ministerial declaration. They are not legally binding, but at least it took a lot of time to bring all the 42 ministers of the sector, supported by the foreign ministers, in order to agree on a formula for trade in the Mediterranean. It gives a hope, but when it comes to the implementation, we stuck with this regulation, with these bilateral agreements, or the requirement to make the good movement and the human movement. With that, I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Monsa, from the perspective, for example, of the representative of a government of the Mediterranean, of a nation around the Mediterranean, it's not just a question of shall we say, the Middle East and North African countries of the Mediterranean suffering from migration, suffering, for example, from what ALMOTAZ has suggested is the brain drain. This has also been seen, for example, in Spain and Catalonia, from certain regions of Italy and Greece, where a lot of people move north within the European Union because perhaps they find more opportunities for employment, or perhaps for better paid salaries, or what have you. Is this something which, as from your department, is something that you're aware of? Is this something that weakens our possibilities to face the challenges of climate crisis here?
Oh, well, it's something that we have to be aware of, but yeah, probably yes. Probably yes. I cannot say much more about it, but I think it probably yes. Yeah.
Okay, Bernd, final comment on that as well. I mean, it's always spoken about, and I sometimes believe that very often the South has a lot more to teach us than the North does. And I mean, I was born, as I said, in England, but I mean, I've been most of my life living in the Mediterranean. And I certainly believe many times that the Mediterranean has a lot more to teach Anglo-Saxon, shall we say, society than vice versa. Your opinion on that? And Bernd, I'd like you also to explain a little bit about the work that you've been doing with regards to the Mediterranean itself and with regards to, shall we say, certain answers to the climate crisis of the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Richard. Indeed, if I look on my knowledge, if I step a moment beside me and look on my knowledge I have, it's a knowledge which is very much based on the achievements of the Enlightenment period and on the period also, if I look on arts and culture, which we like to call the Renaissance. The Renaissance period in Europe caused the rise of the Italian city-states. Our banking system today is based on that period. We still use the words invented by the Medici family on it. We saw there a lot of things that worked, and that worked actually quite well. Scientists, artists were used as diplomatic currency. They were exchanged between city-states as a token of peace, as a token of dialogue. They actually were enormously important as for the development. And we saw also that they kind of built bridges, numerous bridges. Then we were kind of disrupted by the industrialization, and we started to see the rise of nationalism in Europe. Now, in the work which we did in the Mediterranean in particular, we rediscovered a little bit. We rediscovered the roots of the Mediterranean past, the invention they made, the understanding that, for instance, we wouldn't see the agriculture we have today in Europe without the invention of the SAKIA, the water delivery system, which boosted in one single moment the ability to transport water by a factor of 15. And of course, in the same size, increasing the amount of food that could be produced. We saw the rise of universities as an invention brought to us. We saw the rise of mathematics. We use Arab numbers in Europe, in the world, because of that. So what we did, we went a little bit back to the past, and we asked ourselves, if we take these inventions and we reto-project our sustainable development goals, what did they do? And when did things start to go wrong? And in the work, also with numerous local research centers, which acted as a sort of science embassy, harvesting and collecting the knowledge, which then were channeled to us here in the European Commission Science Service, the Joint Research Center. We actually discovered that things went downside when the industrialization came. When we started to deliver things from north to south rather than the other way around. So what we created actually in the collaboration with this local research center is a renaissance, a new renaissance concept, in which on one side we delivered a mechanism that local research center like Eurecat itself can act as science embassy, close to the people, speaking their language, delivering solutions that may work on the ground. We coordinate them on a supranational level. On a supranational level, through organizations like the Union for the Mediterranean or like the European Commission. Now, all this channeled actually a way of thinking in which we found also one element, that technology itself is an important ingredient, but it's only half of the truths we need to tell to solve the problem. The other truth is the socioeconomic and cultural side. I cannot sit in an office in Brussels and tell a Spanish farmer not to grow any more tomatoes because my scientific models tell there will not be enough water. I need to be close to that farmer, engage with that farmer, and show him alternatives. Now, the creation of what we baptized the gateway for the future of the Mediterranean, food, water, energy, and the environment is a new way, in a way which anticipated what we have seen in Cassandra. how to bring together the actors of the quintuple helix to explore, explain, and engage with the people on the ground to find solutions that they're actually ready to uptake and embrace as their own solution, and how this can work. I'm very thrilled to have done such a work. It results into a publication, but it's so much more. It is an as we called it in our session, a creed of collaboration at regional level, empowering people and enabling a dialogue, a structured dialogue around all actors of the quintuple helix, which I believe is a blueprint to change things. Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing experience we did. We will present this experience very soon accessible. But I think, again, this is one step into the right direction. It is not the end of a journey. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you. No, I mean, obviously, I agree with you. We've been working together now on the Renaissance concept, the Renaissance approach for about the last 4 years now. And I think that we are beginning to see that people understand the importance, first of all, of the quintuple helix, which has already been mentioned before today and in other panels throughout the conference. The fact that, and Nina, I'm sorry, but that dog is absolutely gorgeous. That's a great dog. That's the nicest looking panelist we've had all week. But anyway, the quintuple helix, and I think that is so important to what we've been discussing. And I've been listening to all of the panels throughout the last 3 days. And what has come across has been, there's constantly people are talking about collaboration and cooperation. What I have come away from this conference is the feeling that the people who've been expressing themselves without any pre-prepared discourses, without any presentations, they have been actually really describing their true feelings. And that there has been this general consensus towards the fact that we do all need to work together as a society, between the public sector, the private sector, between the cultural sector, and above all, perhaps most importantly, together with research and science, in which will facilitate objective data, objective information on which decisions can be taken, the citizen, the person in the street, so that we can address global issues at a local community level and implement realistic solutions together through a process of co-creation and above all co-implementation. Very often researchers and politicians talk a lot about engagement, citizen engagement. And as was said in the previous panel, in fact, in various panels, both today and yesterday, engagement is not standing up in front of an audience and giving them a speech for 3/4 of an hour and then saying, thank you very much. Engagement is giving people not only the awareness of the issues at hand, not only creating an interest, but giving them an active role in the co-creation and implementation of the solution. No matter whether they are middle-aged men such as myself, no matter whether they are minority groups, no matter whether they are women or youth, or they are old age pensioners, no matter whether they are poor, everybody has the absolute right to be able to participate in the solutions to what are global issues. And the only way that we can do that is to guarantee a policy continuity, to give these policies and the time and the public money which is invested in these solutions the opportunity to really bear their fruits. For that, we need political continuity. And the only way that we can achieve that is through a broad social consensus involving all the sectors from the very beginning. I think that that is an important thing. And indeed, an issue which came up in the previous panel was the fact that what we're describing in many ways is a step towards open democracy does require as well the fact that citizens in general are much better informed. And one would almost say that from the very, very early age, from the time that a child goes to primary school, that we look again at our education system and we ask ourselves as a society, how are we educating our children? are we preparing them to be able to become involved and to be capable of resolving the issues of the future? I think Cassandra has, as always, asked more questions than it has given answers, but there are some general answers which have come through very clearly. We will be publishing all of the transcripts of all of the dialogues which have taken place over the last 3 days. We will then, together with all of the institutions from all over the world who have participated in Cassandra, be publishing some recommendations. And we will, together with the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, and together with, again, all of the supranational organizations, the NGOs and the research centers and the citizen-based groups that have come together here in Cassandra, we will be creating what we would like to describe as the Cassandra Ethics Commission. It's the idea was given to me by somebody who's not very far away from me in this debate, BERND himself, that BERND came up to me the other day and he said, you know what doctors do? They take the Hippocratic Oath. Yeah? And perhaps it's time now that scientists and other key players in the answers to the climate crisis also take such an oath in order to work honestly, openly, without prejudice, towards long-term solutions where could one day, for once and for all, conferences such as Cassandra, and like the many, many conferences which occur all over the world every single year, take place, no longer be necessary. My personal ambition would be that one day conferences such as Cassandra that have addressed the issue of climate crisis and its devastating possible effects on migration, on gender equality and conflict are no longer necessary. I'd like to thank you very much, BERND, for being with me. Nina, as well, it's always a pleasure. Monse, thank you very, very much for being here. It's been an honor to have you here in this, our last concluding panel. And ALMOTAZ, as always, it's a pleasure to be able to enter into always a fruitful dialogue with you. And I would like to thank as well all of the participants from the over more than 70 respective organizations who have contributed and who have participated in what has been the Cassandra Conference 2021. I would like to give a very special thanks to Gemma Lopez and Andrea Reus and Joan Wash of Eurecat, whose help and support and ideas, imagination, Cassandra would never have taken place. And I would also like, above all, to thank those people, those hundreds of people who have registered and who have been attending certain sessions, a number of sessions, or in many cases, apparently all of the sessions over the 3 days of the Cassandra Conference. We look forward to being able to show you and demonstrate and to disseminate the results of this conference. We hope that it will lead to something positive, and we look forward to seeing you again in Cassandra 2023 in order to be able to present to you, hopefully, results, not words, results of what has been started this week. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you very much, Richard. Maybe we do it 2023 here in the palace.
We look forward to it.
Physically, yeah. God bless you all. And thank you very much for hosting us in the beautiful city. Thank you.
Goodbye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much, everyone. Bye-bye.